Hello, Charlie TCG here, and welcome to my standard recap for the Paldea Evolved format. Today I'm going to break down exactly what are the top decks which are being placed on these online tournaments, how this could impact your NAIC sort of meta predictions and kind of like your testing, as well as some of the under the radar sort of picks which you should definitely be prepared to actually see in these big sort of tournaments. So, without further ado, let's look at the top decks, the ones that have been performing really well, and obviously the most played, which have happened in these online tournaments over on Limitless. I know it's from Pokemon Trading Card Game Live. It's not exactly in the best sort of place right now, with a load of cards being banned, which are highly competitive and need for testing. But this has kind of taken over the last couple of weeks and kind of looking at what exactly are their win ratios as well. So the number one most played deck is Shein Power by Excalibur, and having a win rate of nearly 50%, but being 47%. Now, why is this the most played archetype? Well, it's a brand new one. People always like to test the new sort of toys out there, and it gives them that big flashback. Obviously, Keldeo Blastoise back in the 2014-2015 era. I really like this deck in testing. Definitely has a few flaws on it. And a big archetype which kind of struggles with is a number 2 spot, Gardevoir. This again had loads of new toys. Reversal Energy, Azora Town, as well as obviously Iona, really bumps up to make Gardevoir more consistent and more disruptive capability. More capable to do those big one-hit KOs with Reversal Energies with your single prize and Pokemon over with Gardevoir in the late sort of game. The other ones which have a positive matchup afterwards are Lost Zone Box, Lugia Archeops, Lost Zone Giratina, and Fusion Mew and Arceus Giratina. These aren't any of the brand new archetypes. These are ones that gained a few more cards. The likes of Iona plus Iona, Jet Energy, as well as Super Rod really helped these decks really kind of thrive up to it. Lost Fusion Mew obviously had a huge increase in play because obviously it just won the Japan National. So a lot of people are going to see the list, constantly play that, test it as much as possible to really understand Fusion Mew. It goes around the Spiritomb lock, but unfortunately now Spiritomb is banned. So the Path Mew has, as you can see on here, the win rate is increasing because of that, which is really sad to see, but that is an archetype of the downside of Pokemon Trading Card Game Live. Ting-Lu is number 8 by having a decent-ish win rate ratio by being 84%. This is really good to go around the Fusion Mew sort of decks by trying to like damage their Genesects, but if they just attach Fusion Energy, they can constantly keep drawing, and that's one of the really downsides for this. But another archetype in there is Arceus Duraludon, kind of scraping in there a little bit by being 46%, still performing pretty okay in these sort of the top 8s and stuff like that, but it is still a contender which you should really consider. Now, I hope this gives a rough insight exactly what are the top 10 sort of decks people are playing and testing. We can see there's only 2 new archetypes would be introduced, Shein Power and Ting-Lu. Definitely the one which everyone thought it would be sort of played. And the ones which were really good last format and still good in this format are definitely having the more increase in the win rate. Like Lost Zone Giratina, which I think is definitely the most underrated deck in the format and really powerful and still has the huge capability of getting those big one-hit KOs. And obviously Lugia Archeops kind of has that colorless version and Versatile Energy plus Luxray to really help in your single price attackers and even the mirror matchup. I think it's really good to actually understand this, and if you're going to testing for NAIC, these are the top 10 archetypes which I think you should look out for. So the next thing, I'm going to look at some tournament reports that have had over 100 players out there. Now, as of date of recording, there's only been 9 tournaments that have had over 100 players in the Paldea Evolved format. I'm going to look at the top placing decks, the ones that have performed well in the tournaments, as well as the ones which constantly been in the top 8 sort of matchups. So if we just look here at the most sort of wins, we can see here Lost Box and Gardevoir are tied up there by having 3 of the wins, and the rest of them like Giratina, Mew, and Lugia are up there having 1 win apiece. Now, Sableye is obviously definitely the most hugely impactful card we've seen in such a long time. The Lost Mine attack, which can do 12 damage damage to any of your opponent's Pokemon, is really strong. It doesn't go and goes for pretty much everything. And Gardevoir as well obviously has a lot more toys to play with. Iona, Reversal Energy, you've got the Reversal Gardevoir, you've got the Mewtwo V Union, loads of different archetypes as well, which Gardevoir has to play with. And I think it's good to see here these top 5 archetypes which have been winning these huge tournaments are something you should really consider about in your testing sort of things. You will see these decks, you will see Lost Box, you will see Gardevoir, you will probably see Lost Zone Giratina, but definitely see Mew and Lugia V-Star. Because if we just look at the most top cuts of list here, we can see there is already a slight change. Lost Zone Giratina has disappeared. It's not in the top 5 top cut sort of archetypes. We can see here Lugia V-Star is definitely in there the most by being in 13 top cuts. Sableye and the Sable Box, obviously they're 12, Mew is at 10, and Gardevoir and Shein Power are tied at being 9. Now, Sheehan Pao hasn't actually got a win, but it's in their top 8 because it's constantly being played. People are testing, people are understanding how a deck works, how it clicks with Excalibur. Are there any like sort of interesting archetypes to go with? Definitely focusing more on the Palkia build, which is what Sheehan Pao is really doing incredible in that sort of matchup here. And Gardevoir as well, it has definitely the most wins for the least amount of top cuts, but definitely something to always be testing for. If I would kind of pick like a top 5 decks, which you really should be focusing on, it'll most likely be these 5 here. Really the ones which are performing well, the ones that are getting the points, getting the placements, and even performing well in the big tournaments happening over in the rest of Asia, which I've covered over on the channel. Now, what I want to talk to you about now is kind of the under the radar picks, the decks which have been performing well in these tournaments, most likely getting that top 8 placement, but not really getting as far as they could potentially get to it. So the first one I want to talk to you about is Rapid Box. This really only adds Iona to the sort of the fray. It's a new sort of play card, but Rapid Box is always going to be there and always going to be around and a huge threat. What's interesting thing about this, it's had quite a few second place finishes in these tournaments, so still up there is kind of performing pretty well. The Yoga Loop plus the sniper capability of Intellion VMAX is really, really strong, but it kind of falls flat by, as you can see here, it plays a ton of one-off supporters, and you're trying to really constantly be getting most of some of these supporters through the likes of Octillery. Irida is really nice as well, obviously seeing a huge more increase. You can get that Octillery plus one of the item cards you might need. I think it kind of struggles a little bit in the draw sort of factor with this sort of deck, but have the comeback mechanics of Iona is really, really strong. But if we just saw back then, Mew and Gardevoir are up there as being one of the high sort of archetypes out there, and Lugia as well, with the likes of Luxray. All of these can hit for weakness and get those big one-hit KOs on your VMAXs, and kind of can take additional 3 prizes, which you should really be considering about if you want to try out this archetype. Definitely something which is good for like cups and challenges, maybe even some tournaments where we haven't seen it have a huge finish at a big tournament in a while, or even in the ones that happen over in Japan and the rest of Asia. Another one is obviously Ting Lu. Ting Lu is definitely an archetype which is kind of taking a few things by storm. It's performing quite well in these other tournaments. People are picking up and playing with it, but I think the damage output and kind of like the capability that it's trying to shut off Mew, and Mew can easily go around it, and obviously Lost Box can go around it as well by playing more higher counts of Switch Car. It really does struggle to kind of keep that damage to stick as much as possible. Now here you're trying to get there as much as possible. Obviously we have the high counts of Hawlucha, we play Penny, we also play the Gatedraw Bog and Radiant Alakazam with the Spiritomb. Multiple ways to try and slow down the opponent through ability lock, as well as try and have as much damage out there as possible. Fortunately, Radiant Alakazam can only move up to 2 damage counters out there, and you're not playing any fun, weird, like Yoga Loop sort of situation in there, but this can really help with some setups, or potentially constantly be moving out with it so you can get out that extra damage with Ting Lu. I think it's a really interesting archetype to really consider for an ability lock style deck. Unfortunately, obviously in live, Spiritomb is banned, and I believe Penny is as well. So we're not going to see a lot of Ting Lu like really optimize this on live. So it's quite exciting to see that this deck is all going to be evolving, but outside of the scenes of live on these big tournaments. Another one is Arceus and Flying Pikachu. Flying Pikachu is a deck which I think is definitely going to see a huge rise in popularity. With the likes of Lost Box kind of gaining the Jet Energy and the Zora Town, really helps to kind of their matchup and their consistency. Flying Pikachu kind of flies in quite nicely into it. You can kind of stop that Sheehan Pao from attacking, and you hit weakness for Palkia. So the Sheehan Pao Excalibur deck, you have an answer to it. You have the answer for Lost Box because you have Flying Pikachu to kind of slow him down by not letting him attack, and you have to use their switching outs to it. So if you think about that, and Gardevoir, you play Umbreon VMAX to try and hit for weakness in that. So you have lots of ways around trying to get those big one-hit KOs on the kind of relevant meta decks. Arceus is definitely a deck which has always been around, always going to kind of stick around because of how powerful Trinity Nova is, as well as Starbirth, but the lack of these it will have available to it as the format kind of evolves to it is a bit sort of worrying. But Umbreon with the amazing ability to dust out one of the opponent's Pokemon is really good, and having Path to Peak plus Iona is a really good combination. You don't need to worry too much about your own gain Iona yourself because you have Bibarel and Squavet. Really interesting deck, and definitely something you should really consider into your tournament if you're scared of Lost Box, if you're scared of Sheehan Pao, or even Lugia, as well as archetypes like Mew and Gardevoir. This kind of is a really good meta deck because it kind of goes against every single archetype out there. So definitely something which has really good matchups overall to consider. And the other one here is obviously single strike Lugia. This is a deck which obviously is constantly evolving and kind of gained a few extra new toys to play with. Jet Energy, Reversal Energy, Iona, and Luxray are really good partners to have with it. Obviously, Luxray has the Reversal Energy, kind of get those one-hit KOs on Lugia V-Stars, as well as Palkia as well, and even Flying Pikachu, which is really, really powerful. Jet Energy is really good. A lot of your Pokemon have very high retreat costs. Attaching it to one of your attackers on the bench is really good to propel them into the active place. I know I've been hyping a load on the colorless version of Lugia, but I do think that this sort of single strike one is still going to be very popular. I know a lot of the Americans have been playing the single strike Lugia quite a lot, and they're most likely going to stay with it as it's been performing incredibly well over there. So definitely something to keep on your radar. The Urshifu to get those big one-hit KOs and pretty much everything and go for everything is really, really powerful. And having the likes of Mesagoza and Clap Stadium is really helpful for the Lost Box matchup, as well as guaranteeing the Pokemon you might need. Definitely something to consider if you kind of want this Lugia. So I wanted to briefly touch on this sort of version of this one. I do think a single strike is still just as powerful, if not sometimes even stronger at some sort of stages, and definitely one to really keep on your radar. So kind of wrapping up sort of things, not many people are playing live, which is, I know, surprising, right? No, because I think with all the bugs, the ban list which constantly go there, you can't play the hugely competitive meta decks. So a lot of the top players are kind of forcing not to be playing live and doing the testing in real life or other sort of like tabletop simulators or on the Limitless platform. This is quite exciting because when it comes to the internationals in NAIC next week, we're not going to have these big insights, which is what we had on these tournaments sort of had to offer. We've seen some of the bigger player names, kind of seen them play some of the decks of us and get a bit of an insight. So we're going to see a bit more of a surprise factor. I think Lost Box is definitely in a really good place. Is it too powerful? Potentially, because it is winning loads of these online tournaments, and this would have an impact on NAIC. I think we're seeing like the top 3 decks being the most played decks being Lost Box and Chien Pao, Excalibur, and Gardevoir, comparing them to the top like winning ones being Gardevoir and Lost Box, and then obviously you've got the Lugias, you've got your Lost Tina and Mew. You're going to see a big sort of difference there. We're going to see those most likely be probably the top 5 placing them archetypes in sort of NAIC. It's the people feel more comfortable playing, and the ones we know have got really good results over the seas. So definitely something which I hope has been really helpful to kind of give you a bit more of an insight to how the meta is starting to evolve. We are seeing some new decks kind of fade in a little bit with the likes of Chien Pao and Tinglu, but the really powerful ones like Lugia, Lost Box, and Mew have kind of just become more stronger, and Gardevoir is definitely up there being one of the strongest archetypes in the meta. If you've enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, and comment down below what deck are you kind of like been testing a lot in preparation for NAIC or just in general enjoying the Paldea and Evolve format. I'm going to do this every other sort of week or so, kind of giving that insight how the meta is starting to shape up and evolve. I know we're not going to have huge amount of tournaments happening after NAIC, but it's really good to kind of get that understanding of how it's going to evolve. My name is TCG, and I hope you enjoyed this video. Bye for now.